Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
I first met Sophie in ninth grade and we started dating shortly after. By 10th grade, we were pretty much a couple. We didn't have any issues all throughout high school, and like many high school couples, we lost our virginity to each other on the night of the senior prom. Once we found out about sex, we took every opportunity to be together. We'd been talking about getting married since 11th grade and agreed we'd wait until after college to make it official. But college changed Sophie. In high school, our peers recognized that we were a couple, and the guys left Sophie alone, but those same circumstances didn't hold once we got to college. While there were some old classmates from our high school there, the majority of students were from other places, and the guys didn't see Sophie as my girl, they saw her as a desirable female, and she was constantly being hit on. I knew it was happening, but there wasn't much I could do about it. We had different majors and took different classes, so we usually only saw each other in the evenings after classes and after I got off work. The attention had an effect on Sophie. She became more flirty, for lack of a better word. Several times, I saw her walking with other guys, smiling and talking with them, but I was on the other side of the quad, and she didn't notice me. Twice, I took a shortcut through the student center on my way from one class to another and saw Sophie in the cafeteria, once with a guy and once with two of them. It never registered on me until much later that I never saw her with other girls, it was always with guys. It never worried me. We were a couple, right? We were in love, right? We were planning on getting married, right? So nothing for me to sweat, right? She was a great-looking girl, so naturally, she attracted guys, but she was mine, and she proved it every night when we got together. 4 years later, we graduated, found jobs in our fields of study, got married, and began a life of wedded bliss. I was the poster boy for fat, dumb, and happy for almost 4 years before the balloon popped. It was an accident that brought about my rude awakening. I was sitting at my desk at work when Olivia from the mailroom put some files on my desk. I picked up the top one and started going through it. I wondered why it had been routed to me since it concerned an account that Lucas Brooks was handling. Lucas was an old classmate from high school and college. I was halfway through it when I spotted a major error. A quick calculation in my head told me that the projections were off by almost $1.6 million. I was reaching for my calculator to work out the exact figure when Lucas came rushing into my office and asked if I had seen the file. "I've got to make copies of it and be ready to give the Dynamics Incorporated people a presentation in half an hour," he said. "I have the file right here. I don't know why I have it. I guess someone wanted me to look it over, so I did. But I don't think you want to present this to Provis." I showed him what I'd found, and even though I know it is usually only a figure of speech, I'd swear that his face went white. "Oh, man, this could have cost me my job. I need to do a quick rework on it." He took the file and hurried off. It was a Thursday, and Sophie always had to work late on Thursdays to get payroll out for the Friday payday, so I did my usual and hit Kevin's lounge after work for his half-pound burger and a couple of beers before heading home. I just finished my burger and was starting on my second beer when Lucas came in, saw me, and joined me in my booth. He ordered a beer from Linda and told her to give him my bill. "It's the least I can do after you saved my job today." I didn't argue with him over it since we weren't talking big money, and we sat and talked about work for a bit, then some, "Have you seen so-and-so," and a little of, "Have you heard what so-and-so did," and then Lucas turned my world upside down and inside out. "I have to ask you this, Ethan. It's none of my business, and I know it, but you're a nice guy, and I really like you. I'd like to know why you put up with Sophie." "I don't know what you mean, Lucas. Why do you let her screw around on you? What the hell are you talking about?" He took one look at my face and cursed, "Oh, you didn't know." He started to get up, but I grabbed him and pulled him back down. "No, you don't, Lucas. You don't drop a bomb like that on me and then get up and run. Sit back down and spill it." He sat down and said, "I don't know what to say, Ethan. Just tell it, Lucas. Just spit it out. I thought you knew, Ethan. I mean, it's been, what, 8 years? And you don't know? My God, Ethan, how could you not know?" "Know what, Lucas?" "That Sophie is a round-heeled 3404. I just stared at him, unable to ask a single question. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I wish I'd never opened my mouth. I shook off my mental paralysis and said, "But you did, Lucas, so now you have to finish it." "How do you know, and how long have you known?" "I've known since our final semester in high school, and I know because I'm one of the many who did her." I was stunned at the information but had a crying need to know. "Start at the beginning, Lucas, and don't leave anything out. Please, don't leave anything out." The story that unfolded was shocking to me, not only the content but the fact that it had been going on for over 8 years, and I hadn't had a clue. Not even a whisper of one. 2 weeks after the senior prom, Lucas had gone over to his cousin's house, and as was his habit, he just walked into the house and headed for Daniel's bedroom, where he knew Daniel would be on his computer. But Daniel wasn't on the computer, he was on Sophie. Lucas stood there watching them, and they both saw him, and since neither one of them yelled at him to get out, he undressed and waited his turn. He and Daniel took turns with Sophie until she called a halt to the proceedings. She said she had to get cleaned up and meet me when I got off work from my part-time job at Parker's Mart. He and Daniel saw her off and on whenever I was at work, until Daniel met and got serious with Megan Scott. She kept seeing Lucas for a couple of weeks, and then one day when he stopped to see her, she was already with Sean Anderson and Eric Bennett, and he joined in. All three of them took turns with her until she had to stop so she could meet me. Lucas shared her with several other guys, and many times she'd been with more than half a dozen guys present. We were friends and all, but it wasn't like we were best friends, you know, and you remember how it was when we were 18 and had sex on the brain. You guys were kind of going steady, but I didn't think the two of you were all that serious anyway. I mean, if you were really serious, would she be with anybody who showed her a good time? It didn't change when we started college. As I remember, first semester freshman year, she had classes Monday through Thursday and Thursday through Friday and didn't have any classes on Fridays. Her last class on Monday through Thursday let out at 2, and her last class on Thursday through Friday let out at 1. I don't remember your schedule, but when you got out of class, you went to work, and when Sophie got out of class, she was off to a bedroom somewhere. Fridays were like an all-day rompathon. It was like that all the way through school, Ethan. Class schedules changed from term to term, but the constant was Sophie meeting up after class until you got off work. I'm making it sound like it was every day, but it wasn't, 2 or 3 times a week, though. Most of us guys were shocked when you and Sophie married. We just knew you had to know what she'd been doing, but you married her anyway. A lot of us thought that maybe you were one of those guys who got off on your woman being with other men. Blake thought that maybe you and Sophie were swingers, but no one ever remembered seeing you with another girl, though we were always seeing Sophie with other guys. I had no idea, Lucas, not even a whisper of an idea. Damn, Ethan, I'm sorry to be the one to clue you in. Since you never knew, it stands to reason that you probably don't know that she has a standing Thursday night date with Mark and Alex Rivera. The Thursday you play basketball, she sees Peter Sullivan. I don't know who else she sees and when, but it's a good bet that anytime you're off somewhere doing something, so is Sophie. Not that it matters much, but I did stop being with her when you got married. A single woman is one thing, but messing around with a married woman is something totally different. I didn't know what to say, Lucas, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was sure as hell going to do something. I polished off my beer and stood up to leave. I stopped and turned to Lucas. Thanks, Lucas. Thanks for the burger, the beer, and for pulling my head out of my ass. As I drove home, I kept rolling what Lucas had told me around in my head. Did I believe what he'd told me? On one hand, I said, no way, Sophie loves me, and she wouldn't do that to me. On the other hand was the question, why would Lucas lie to me? I had to finally admit to myself that he wouldn't. He knew I'd check out what he'd told me, and if he had lied, how would we be able to keep working together? The answer was that we wouldn't be able to, and Lucas knew it. It was going to be hard enough to work with him knowing about him and Sophie, but we would eventually get by it because I did remember what it was like to be a teen and have sex on the brain. I knew that if some other guy's girl had offered me sex back then, and I didn't have Sophie, I'd have taken it. The real question was, what the hell do you do now, Ethan? I didn't know that Sophie and I were through. I could maybe, just maybe, have gotten by a one-night drunken mistake or maybe even a short-term affair if Sophie could convince me that it would never happen again. But outright 3404 for 8 years? No way. I was in bed pretending to be asleep when Sophie got home from working on the payroll, and I ignored her when her hand touched me. the woman wanted to give me sloppy seconds, and I wasn't going for it. Admittedly, I'd been getting them for years, and it hadn't killed me, but I didn't know it at the time. I did now, though, and the touch of her hand on my body made my skin crawl, and for the first time ever, I didn't get an erection when Sophie touched me. I was up before Sophie in the morning, and I had the coffee on and was reading the morning paper when Sophie came down. "What happened to you last night? I came home horny and eager, and you were already in bed. That isn't like you, Ethan." Something that I ate didn't agree with me, and I was feeling poorly, so I went to bed early. "Well, I certainly hope you're better today. I'm going to need you to do double duty tonight to make up for last night." As soon as I got to work, I called Matthew Monroe. Matthew was a friend from high school and was now an attorney practicing corporate law, whatever that was, and I asked him to recommend a take-no-prisoners divorce lawyer. "What does that mean?" "It means that what I'd hoped was true isn't, but you were looking for a divorce lawyer means that what I thought you and Sophie had is not what you and Sophie have, and that you have finally found out about her." "What did you think we had? An open marriage of some type? How else could Sophie do what she was doing and still be with you? I mean, it was obvious to everyone that you were devoted to her, and how could that be unless you were okay with what she was doing?" Believe it or not, Matthew, I first had no clue as to what she was doing until yesterday. Matthew was silent for a couple of seconds and then said, "Give Blake Simmons a call and tell him I sent you." I called Blake Simmons and told him that Matthew recommended him, and he told me that he could see me that day if I could be there at 1. I told him I could make it, and I did. Blake told me that my options ranged from an amicable split to a scorched earth policy. We were not in a no-fault state, and adultery was an acceptable grounds for divorce. But to go for a divorce using adultery as grounds, I needed irrefutable evidence. Hearsay wouldn't do it. "How do I get the evidence that I need?" I asked. He took a card out of his desk and handed it to me. It read Daniel Mitchell, private investigator. His office is just across the street. If you want, I can give him a call and see if he can get you in right away. Please do. I want to get this over with as soon as possible. Go ahead and start the divorce paperwork, and I'll get the evidence to you as soon as I get it. Blake made the call, and 10 minutes later, Daniel Mitchell was telling me what we needed to do. Unfortunately, one of the things I needed to do was act completely natural around Sophie and not give her any reason to suspect that I wasn't still the clueless clown she was accustomed to. And, as distasteful as it may be to you, Mitchell said, it means no changes in your routine. If you have sex 3 or 4 times a week, you have to do it. If you are usually the instigator, you will need to do it. Just remember that you're no longer making love, you're just getting your rocks off. Do not do anything that might make her change her routine in any way. It is important to us and what we want to happen that she be clueless of the fact that there has been a change in your relationship. I went back to my office, bit the bullet, and called Sophie at work. It was our habit to go out for dinner every Friday night and for breakfast every Sunday morning, so when I got her on the phone, I asked if Giovanni's was okay for dinner, and she said it was. While I was eating my veal marsala and Sophie was working on her rigatoni and sipping white wine, employees of Mitchell Investigations were placing wireless cameras and listening devices in the house. As I took a sip of my Merlot, I was running over Mitchell's words to me. It is natural that you will try to spot the hidden cameras, but you have to fight the urge. If she notices you doing it, there is a chance that all our efforts will be wasted. The other thing you will need to do is force yourself to act natural in the bedroom, and that is not going to be easy for you. After dinner, I asked Sophie if she wanted to go for a few drinks and maybe some dancing, and she told me, "No, we need to get home so you can make it up to me for letting me down last night." On the way home, she slid over next to me, unzipped my pants, and said, "Drive carefully, sweetie. Don't hit anything that might make me bite off your, well, you know." In my mind, what she was doing wasn't something special for me, but what she'd done with 100 other men over the last 8 years. But as disgusted as I might have been with Sophie, human nature took over a couple of minutes in, and my body took over, ignoring the rest. As soon as I turned into our driveway, Sophie told me to hurry up and get up to the bedroom. I couldn't follow Mitchell's advice, no way could I act natural, knowing that I might be performing for an audience. So I went to where I was told the switch would be and shut the system off. I left my cell phone on the seat of the car, knowing that when I saw it on my way out of the house, it would remind me to turn the system back on. The next morning, I woke up before Sophie and turned on the coffee maker. I was reading the morning paper when she came downstairs. What happened to you last night? I came home feeling playful, and you were already in bed. That isn't like you, Ethan. I didn't mention the switch, of course. As soon as Sophie left for her Saturday hair appointment, I turned the cameras back on, even though I doubted anything would happen while I was on my morning run. The switch only turned off the cameras, the listening devices and phone tap were always active. I went back to my office and checked the footage from the night before. To my surprise, the system had recorded Sophie on a phone call before she'd left for her appointment. Good morning, lover. Are we still on for today? You bet. My wife took the kids to the zoo, so we've got until 5 tonight. You know I can't stay that long, I need to be home by 2. Ethan is starting to wonder why I'm out so long on Saturdays. Well, then skip the hair appointment and get over here sooner. She laughed. And what do I tell Ethan when he asks why I've been gone so long, and my hair isn't done? I recognized the man's voice, it was my cousin, Nathan. I was steaming by the time I finished listening and wondering how many of my other relatives she'd been with. Sophie came back home around 2 p.m. and mentioned running into Anna, Julia, and Grace at the salon. It might have been true, but now I doubted every single word out of her mouth. The following Monday, I told Sophie I'd be going out of town on Thursday for a business trip, claiming I'd be gone until Thursday evening and would be back in time to take her out for dinner. There was no trip, of course, but I hoped to catch her using our home as a rendezvous spot. Thursday morning, she kissed me goodbye, and I took my overnight bag and left the house as if on my trip. I went to work, put in a few hours, then drove to our neighborhood and parked down the block. Using my laptop, I accessed the live feeds from the hidden cameras. Around noon, Sophie was on the phone again. Hey, it's me. What's up? Ethan just left on a 3-day trip. You ready to spend 3 fun-filled nights with me? You know it. I'll call Mark and see if he's in. I'll be home by 6. I shut down the laptop and called Blake to let him know we'd have solid evidence soon. That night, as expected, 2 guys arrived at my house. Sophie greeted them at the door, and within moments, they were in the bedroom. It was hard watching the footage, but it confirmed everything Lucas had told me. Friday morning, I watched the 2 men leave just after dawn, and I knew this was the proof I needed. I called Blake to let him know the papers should be ready to serve by Friday morning. Friday morning, I was parked just down the street from the house, and right on cue, at 5:55, the 2 men exited. They turned to say goodbye to Sophie, who was standing just inside the door, and that's when they saw the men with the envelope, who handed the divorce papers to Sophie. She was speechless as I drove up, waved, and left without a word. In the papers I had served was a letter, blunt and to the point, I don't want to speak to you unless our attorneys are present. Don't try to call me, don't try to explain. We are done. 15 minutes after I pulled away from the house, my cell rang, and it was Sophie. I let it go to voicemail, along with the next 7 calls from her. When I got to work, I told my secretary that I'd left Sophie and not to put any calls from her through. A thought struck me as I was opening my office door, and I turned back to my secretary, Sophia. Another thing, Sophia. If Sophie shows up here, please tell her I'm not in. Tell her I've gone to meet a client or left early. Anything, just make sure I don't have to see her. Sophia nodded, understood. I'll let Eva at the front desk know, too, so she can give you a heads up if Sophie comes by. I thanked her and went back to my desk. My phone showed 10 missed calls from Sophie by noon, but I ignored every one. At lunchtime, I called my dad and brother to let them know what was going on. I asked my dad to let my mom know, and to please try to keep her from getting involved. Sophie had been like a daughter to her, and I knew my mom might try to encourage me to patch things up. My dad agreed, although he hinted it might be hard for my mom to stay out of it. The rest of the day was a blur as I tried to concentrate on work, but my mind kept circling back to what Sophie might be thinking or planning now. Finally, around 5 p.m., Sophia stopped by on her way out. Ethan, just so you know, your wife called 5 more times in the afternoon. I told her each time that you'd left instructions not to be disturbed, and I think she got the message since she stopped calling. But if she shows up here in person, Eva and I will handle it. Thanks, Sophia. I appreciate that. She left, and I finished up some work until 7. When I got to the lobby, Eva was gone, and the only one there was George, the night security guard. He looked at me with a knowing smile. "Tough day, huh?" I nodded. "You have no idea, George. Heading out the back way tonight to avoid any surprises." "Good call, Mr. Daniels. If she comes by, I'll tell her you left earlier." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Divorces are never fun." "Had two myself." "Hang in there." I thanked George, exited through the back, and took a quick detour to Dave's diner across the street. I ordered some dinner, taking a seat where I could keep an eye on the office from a distance. Halfway through my meal, I saw Sophie pull up to the building and press the call button. After a brief conversation with George, she finally got back in her car and drove off. The next day, Saturday, was busy as I tackled everything I should have done before serving Sophie. I went to the bank, cleaned out our joint accounts, and removed my personal papers from the safe deposit box. I left all of Sophie's items in there, dropping my wedding ring in the box for her to find. I stopped for breakfast at Sunrise Cafe and took care of canceling our joint credit cards over the phone. By evening, I returned to the motel and decided to unwind with a few beers at the bar next door. As luck would have it, Chloe and her friends Megan and Taylor were there. Megan's husband was home from deployment, so it was just Chloe and Taylor tonight. "Hey, Ethan. Care to join us?" Chloe called over when she saw me at the bar. "Sure, I'd love to." I grabbed my beer and joined them at their table. "Where's Megan?" I asked as I took a seat. "She's busy with her husband tonight," Taylor said with a wink. "They have a lot of catching up to do." We chatted, and after a few minutes, Chloe leaned over. "So, where's your ring, Ethan? Last time we saw you, you were wearing it." "I served my wife with divorce papers yesterday," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. They both looked at me with a mixture of surprise and sympathy. Taylor spoke first. "Well, that sucks. I'm sorry, Ethan. I mean, that must be hard." "Thanks. It's tough, but it's for the best," I said, trying to sound confident. We spent the rest of the evening talking, dancing, and sharing laughs, and for the first time in days, I felt a little bit of weight lift off my shoulders. Chloe, it turned out, wasn't married, she was just good friends with Megan and Taylor. The thought crossed my mind that she'd be a fun person to get to know better someday. Sunday was quiet, and I spent most of it by the motel pool with a book, trying to relax. On Monday, I drove the rental car to work, hoping Sophie wouldn't realize I was back and think I was still out of town. My plan seemed to work, and I managed to get through the day without incident. But Thursday, when I left the office at the end of the day, there was Sophie, parked next to my car. The moment she saw me, she got out and stood by my driver's side door. "We need to talk, Ethan." Ignoring her, I walked straight to my car, but she moved to block my way. "Come on, Ethan. Let me explain." I gave her a hard look and pushed past her, making her stumble as I got into my car. Rolling down the window, I said, "You need to go back and read the letter that came with the divorce papers, Sophie. I won't talk to you unless our attorneys are present, and even then, all I'll talk about is the divorce. We're done." "I don't want a divorce, Ethan. I want you." I shook my head. "We're done, Sophie. Accept it because I'm not changing my mind." I rolled up the window and drove off, leaving her standing there in the parking lot. But it quickly became apparent that Sophie wasn't going to take no for an answer. When I left the office on Friday, two men approached me as I was heading to my car. They were the same guys I'd seen in the footage from my bedroom, the ones Sophie had been with. One of them said, "Don't do anything stupid, old man, and you won't get hurt. Miss Sophie says she wants to talk to you, and you're being obstinate, so we're taking you to her. The easy way or the hard way, you're coming with us." I realized these two probably thought I'd be an easy target, dressed in my office suit with a briefcase. Part of me wanted to fight back, knowing I could likely take them by surprise. But then I thought about how Sophie was escalating this and wondered if going along with them would give me a clearer picture of what she had planned. So I let them push me into my car, where they sat on either side of me and drove me to the house. As we walked inside, Sophie instructed them to sit me down in a chair and make sure I stayed there. "We're not getting a divorce, Ethan," she announced. At that, I started to get up, but one of the men pushed me back down. Sit down, or else, he muttered. Sophie turned to me, her expression stern. We're going to stay married, but there will be a few changes in how we live. I'm sorry you found out about my condition, but now that you know, you'll have to live with it. I love you, Ethan. I'm not letting you go. Your condition. I'm a nymphomaniac, she said. You unleashed it when we got together back in high school. I need more than any one person can give me. Nonsense, I said. There are treatments for that sort of thing. Sure, but they all make me feel awful. Besides, I like who I am, she said with a smirk. You know, Sophie, you could have just told me. Instead, you deceived me for years. You had choices. And now, I have one. I'm walking away. I stood up and headed toward the door, knowing this was the final line I needed to draw. As I moved toward the door, Sophie shouted, "Stop him." The two men lunged at me, but this time, I was ready. I spun around, swinging my briefcase into the first guy's face. He stumbled back, clutching his nose. Before the other guy could react, I drove my knee into his stomach, then followed with an elbow to his jaw, sending him staggering backward. Both of them were down, groaning. Sophie, it's over. You're not getting away with this, I said, breathing heavily. But before I could take another step, I heard her voice behind me, cold and calm. Don't move, Ethan, or I'll shoot. I turned slowly and saw Sophie holding a small handgun, pointed directly at me. Go ahead, Sophie. Shoot me. Just remember, every word you've said, every threat, every lie, it's all been recorded. Her eyes widened, but she didn't lower the gun. What are you talking about? I had private investigators bug the house before I filed for divorce, I lied, hoping to throw her off. Everything, this ambush, the threats, and now you pointing a gun at me, it's all been recorded. You're going to jail, Sophie. You, and anyone who helped you. She faltered, her hand shaking slightly. You're lying. Try me. Just know that even if you pull that trigger, I've made sure I have friends who'll send the recordings straight to the police. I took a step toward her, watching her face shift between anger and desperation. Sophie, this has to stop. You lost. I'm filing for divorce, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. She lowered the gun, but her expression was venomous. You'll regret this, Ethan. You're going to regret every single decision you've made. At that moment, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. She watched in disbelief as I calmly reported, "Yes, this is Ethan Daniels. I'm at 1508 Cedar Lane, and I'm being held at gunpoint by my soon-to-be ex-wife. Please send help immediately." Sophie took a step back, panic flashing across her face. What are you doing, Ethan? What I should have done a long time ago, I said, keeping the line open as I stepped away from her. She seemed frozen, unsure of her next move. Within minutes, I could hear the sirens approaching, and relief washed over me. As the police pulled up outside, I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed. Officers entered the house, and after a brief standoff, Sophie was disarmed and placed in handcuffs. As they led her out, she glared at me, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. You think this is over, Ethan? It's not. You'll regret this. One of the officers took my statement, and as I recounted the events, I realized how far Sophie had fallen from the woman I'd once loved. She was taken away, and as I watched the squad car disappear down the street, I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, it was truly over. The next day, I called Blake and told him what had happened. He assured me that with Sophie's actions and the police report, we'd have a strong case to finalize the divorce without further complications. I also filed a restraining order, making sure she'd have to keep her distance if she were ever released. Days turned into weeks, and I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. The divorce went through smoothly, and I managed to keep most of my assets. Sophie faced multiple charges for unlawful detention, assault, and making false statements to the police. After the dust had settled, I went back to Kevin's Lounge, the place where I'd gone after work to clear my mind. I took a seat at the bar, ordered my usual, and let the familiar surroundings bring me some peace. A few minutes later, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Mind if I join you? It was Chloe, her smile warm and genuine. Of course, I said, feeling a surge of relief at the sight of her. We chatted, laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. As we finished our drinks, Chloe looked at me and said, "I know you've been through a lot, Ethan, but if you're up for it, maybe we could see where this goes." No expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. I looked at her, grateful for the chance at a fresh start. "I'd like that, Chloe. I'd like that a lot." And with that, I walked out of the bar with her by my side, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting as I looked forward to what the future might hold. Over the next few weeks, life slowly started to settle down. My nights became quieter, my mind more at ease, and gradually, I felt my old self returning. I spent more time focusing on work, rekindling friendships, and setting goals for the future. But the highlight of those weeks was spending time with Chloe. At first, we kept things casual, meeting a few times a week to grab a drink or go for a walk. She was a breath of fresh air, full of energy and laughter. We didn't rush anything, we both knew I needed time to heal, and she respected that. She never pushed me to talk about Sophie or what I'd been through unless I brought it up. Instead, she focused on creating new memories with me, and slowly but surely, I found myself smiling more and dwelling on the past less. One evening, Chloe invited me over to her place for dinner. I'd brought a bottle of wine, and as we cooked together, I felt a sense of peace and warmth that I hadn't felt in years. After dinner, we settled on her couch, talking about our childhoods, dreams, and the things we loved. At one point, she took my hand, and I felt the ease of being around someone who truly understood me. "You know," she said softly, "you're stronger than you think, Ethan. You went through hell, and you came out the other side. I know it probably doesn't feel like it sometimes, but you did." I looked at her, taking in the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of self-doubt begin to ease. "Thanks, Chloe. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you." As the months passed, Chloe became a steady presence in my life. We began spending more time together, traveling on weekends, and eventually, I introduced her to my family. My parents welcomed her with open arms, grateful to see me happy again, and my mom, who had taken Sophie's betrayal hard, finally seemed to find closure. One Sunday morning, as Chloe and I sat on my porch drinking coffee, I looked out over the city, feeling a sense of gratitude I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew I'd found someone who not only understood my past but supported the future I was building. Over the next year, I continued to work hard, earned a promotion, and even bought a new house. Chloe was there every step of the way, encouraging me, cheering me on, and reminding me to let go of the burdens of the past. She was my partner, my friend, and soon, I realized, my love. On the anniversary of our first date, I took her to the same bar where we'd first met. As the evening wound down, I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small box. Her eyes widened as I opened it to reveal a ring. "Chloe, you've been with me through the worst and helped me find my best. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." The months that followed were filled with planning, laughter, and family gatherings, and when we finally stood together, exchanging vows in a small ceremony, I knew my life had taken a turn I never could have predicted. Chloe had shown me that love, trust, and happiness were not only possible but worth fighting for. In the years that followed, we built a life together filled with love, support, and trust. The shadows of my past no longer haunted me, and I found peace in the present, knowing that with Chloe by my side, I had everything I needed. Sophie was a chapter of my life that had taught me resilience and strength. But now, I was on a new journey, and as I looked over at my wife and our life together, I knew I'd finally found where I belonged. Thank you for watching. After all this drama and heartbreak, Ethan found a way to rebuild his life and start fresh. What do you think? Could you handle such a shocking betrayal with the same courage? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. See you next time.